for coming in.
Thanks for having me.
It's good to see you.
Always.
You've got a lot going on in your life.
This is true.
Yeah. Well, we've been friends for quite a while, but for the audience, you want to just give a quick bio and what you're doing, where you've been, how far back you want to go, and I may drop some things in if you leave them out.
Sure,
You're a man of many talents.
So grew up in Cincinnati, Ohio, and came down to Atlanta right after college, which was almost 22 years ago, to work for the Home Depot. Worked there for about 4 years, mostly in M&A. Then went and worked for a private equity firm for about 10 years here in Atlanta. During that time, started brewing beer in the backyard with some friends.
Right across the street from my house.
Right across the street from your house. So you had to endure 20 to 50 people every Monday night.
But I wasn't living there yet. I was still a few streets back then.
That's true. That's right.
It's kind of like the famous house now. You know, it's like you go visit like Margaret Mitchell House. It's like,
that's right.
It's like the Monday night house.
I'm waiting for the historical marker to get put up.
Yeah, that's right. I'll put it up in their yard.
There you go, please. Actually, I'm sure that they would love it because they love telling the story. The owners now, they bought it from us. So we were brewing beer in that backyard and we'd have all these people come by. And then that turned into a real business. So launched Monday Night Brewing in 2011 with two partners. I stayed on in the private equity firm for 5 more years and then came over to the brewery in 2016 to be the CEO and help it grow. I'm not really a zero to one guy. I really like taking something that's got some potential and like growing and scaling it. Mm-hmm. And that was a really great time to jump over and do that. So I've been doing that for the last 8 years. And then in the last year and a half, have been started to think about what's next vocationally. And so have launched a small investment fund to go buy small businesses. So kind of combining a decade of M&A experience with a decade of operating and growing a small business in a pretty blue collar space, which I've really loved.
Yeah.
And yet still trying to transition my day-to-day involvement at the brewery, while also, my wife and I, as you know, are part of a church plant right around the corner from where we live 17, 18 years ago. So I'm an elder at the church, lead worship a couple times a month. And then I've got 4 kids and a wonderful wife that also keep me busy. So
you got a full
there's a lot
life
going on.
Hey, talk about musical background a little bit, because you're obviously a talented musician. Well, the audience doesn't know that, but I know that. And, you play at the church, you played for us privately, but when did that start in your life?
I started taking piano lessons in 3rd grade.
Okay.
And then
was that something your parents
They
locked into?
A little bit. And then I pretty quickly really enjoyed it.
Yeah.
And then, so my sister and I took it for a long time. My brother kind of convinced my parents to let him bail.
Let him out.
And then in 7th grade, picked up a guitar because that was cool and girls liked it. Yeah. And would sit next to the radio at the time and wait for Dave Matthews songs to come on and try to hit record on a cassette tape.
I remember those days.
And then play it back and just listen over and over and over again. So took some guitar lessons and then, it was probably 8th grade, started playing music at the church a little bit and then some bands in high school and then played really have ever since then. It's been a big part of my life.
And so what were the covers you played in high school? I was actually sitting in church the other day and the pastor mentioned his affinity for Driving and Crying, which brought back a flood of memories of oh man, when I was a kid, in high school, that's what people were playing and it was such a big band. So was there...
I mean, Dave Matthews live. The one I really remember very vividly was playing Are You Gonna Go My Way by Lenny Kravitz in a junior high gymnasium, which a gymnasium is the worst acoustics for any live music, period. And then throw 4 8th graders who are just learning their instruments on top of it. And it was a cacophony of sound.
Yeah.
Let's say.
It was like Battle of the Bands.
Yeah.
Those were the good old days.
And I remember playing Ants Marching with a band a little later in high school at a laundromat bar that was called Sudsy Malone's in Cincinnati. And it was 18 plus and I was 16. So I had to get special permission to come in. Yeah. And that was one of my at that point I was that was the first time I feel like I got really hooked on playing live music. Yeah. It was a blast.
Yeah. Well, we still are blessed by it today. So now you also did a stop at Harvard, right? Is that where you met your wonderful wife?
This is where I met my wonderful wife. Yeah. My sophomore, her freshman year. We met there. So I studied psychology, I had no idea what I wanted to do with my life. I just found psychology really interesting because I find people interesting. Yeah. And I couldn't take an accounting class. There are literally no practical classes that I could take. And so I just got to take really interesting stuff, which didn't help my clarity for what I wanted to do career-wise, but it was just a really interesting, fascinating place to be.
And then you came out and worked with numbers for years and years.
Yeah. Though one of the things I love about M&A and investing is there's absolutely sort of the quantitative part of it. But to be a good investor, you have to really engage with people and think strategically and think big picture and put the big picture ideas in the context of the specific people that you're working with and are running the business day to day. And so I love that piece of investing. That's the magic of it to me.
Yeah. Well, and correct me if I'm wrong, with Monday Night, you're working with like the whole strata of people and jobs, and probably same now with what you're doing with the investment fund, because you guys are buying. How would you categorize the businesses you're buying?
Yeah, so they typically are what I call like boring AI-proof, Amazon-proof businesses that operate generally the same 20 years today as they did 20 years ago and will 20 years from now that I can explain to my teenagers. Yeah. So we just closed on our first investment, which is a residential fencing installation business. Yep. So that's kind of squarely in the spot. They tend to be businesses that a lot of them are owned by people who are kind of boomers or aging out of the workforce, but don't really have a succession plan. And so they care about getting a good value for their company, but they also care a lot about their legacy and who's running it and how their people are treated. And there's ways in which sort of the private equity is a bad word for a lot of these smaller businesses, and frankly, rightly so in a lot of cases. And so it's fun to bring a little bit more of a alignment and what I'd like to call it like a redemptive edge to investing in those businesses. Yeah.
And certainly using those relational skills. I mean, that was the point I was getting to with Monday Night and with the new one.
Yeah. I mean, you're talking to
people like all parts of society, white collar, blue collar, old, young.
Yeah. I mean, I spent the last 2 days in Dallas meeting with like family offices for like, that are managing a couple $1 billion. And then this morning I got a call from Fred Smith, who runs the fence company, who has a 10th grade education and works with his hands all day to talk about buying an extra truck worth of lumber because he's worried about supply. Yeah. So I love being able to sort of jump back and forth into those different worlds.
Yeah. Any ahas come from that, not tension, but kind of living in the middle of that where you're talking to both sides?
Yeah. I mean, in a lot of ways, I think it really helps me understand a bit more of where we are in this moment culturally, like the polarization, because I just want to I kept thinking about how I'd love to get both of those different people in the same room together. And so I feel like a bit of a bridge, which is fun, but I think my ultimate hope is that can we as a society just really sit in those places with each other. Had lunch in this beautiful complex that's got, a ton of really wealthy investment firms and family offices. And I was asking one of the guys, who's a really great guy, but I asked him, like, do you ever feel a little bit in an echo chamber in here? And he was like, yeah, absolutely. It's one of the downsides. And so I've thought a lot about that in my own life, is how do I, wherever like gravity is pulling me socially, culturally, politically, to try to find ways to align my time and relationships with things that are different than that, to just keep my mind open and keep myself challenged.
Yeah. Yeah. We've talked a lot about with the first set of guests, just the importance of, challenging your thinking, going to people that wouldn't be maybe where the flow is pulling you, hearing their perspective. How does that enrich your work over here? And how does that, and so just having this wide variety of voices, perspectives, worldviews, mindsets, and
motivations, circumstances. Yeah.
Yeah. And, and fears in a lot of case, that's driving a lot of this. So so it's awesome that you sit at this intersection of that, and have for a while. I mean, it seems like Monday Night was probably a similar deal.
Yeah. I mean, Monday Night's a very blue collar business. We manufacture, it's a manufacturing business and it's a hospitality business. So we have about 200 employees. Most of them are part-time bartenders or back of house, like line cooks, and or work on a packaging line. We've got some white collar professional folks too, but that's the minority of our team. And so one anecdote that jumps to mind is that it was shocking to me early on when I heard that our brewers didn't really want to have overtime. Like, why wouldn't they want to have overtime? That's like time and a half pay.
Yeah.
Like, and I realized like a lot of them, not all of them, but a lot of them would rather work 35 hours a week and have an extra 5 hours to play disc golf with their buddies than have an extra 5 hours and more money in their pocket.
Yeah.
And that's just, I've always been in circles where, you push yourself as hard as you can all the time. Like a 40-hour work week sounds miserable to me.
Yeah.
It's way too little. But I've had to learn to really put myself in the shoes of other people in that context. Very different from the private equity firm where 60 hours a week is a light one. Yeah.
Well, and there's probably some wisdom in that of the 35-hour and go play disc golf.
Yeah.
I think, as I get older anyway, I see the wisdom of that more and more. I mean, when you're young, you have this like gear and pressure to go out and just burn the candle at both ends.
Right.
And some people keep doing that, but I think they see, health consequences and mental consequences and spiritual and those things later on.
For sure.
Those brewers are onto something.
They are. And the other thing I've had to realize is that it doesn't mean that they aren't engaged in their work. They don't care about the quality of it. Like, I think those are the assumptions. Like, if you don't want to work as many hours, it means you're not engaged. You don't care. And that couldn't be further from the truth. Those guys are dialed in every day.
Yeah.
And I've really come to appreciate that.
Well, and not to go down the rabbit hole, but it does seem like this generation is forcing some change. Like, I know there's been several articles and, about even Wall Street and how long they're working. And I know it's a rite of passage and some of that's good, but I feel like this younger generation also is saying like, wait a minute, this is a little out of balance, like we need a little life too.
Yeah.
Which is good. All right. So I want to rewind a little bit, but just creativity thinking. Like, one of the reasons I was so excited to have you on is because you're a man of many talents. You're a musician, obviously super creative there. I think business can be really creative. You've done that by coming up with this, beer brand that's really successful now, and now moving into the space of investment fund. Maybe let's start with, where are you finding your best moments of creativity or thinking or insight in this season? And then I'm curious, during other seasons, have there been similar moments that may have been different, but gosh, this is where I was really locking in and kind of coming alive.
Yeah. It definitely was varied by season for sure. Right now, I'll start with where I am right now. The two most recent books that I've read that have been really sort of at the opposite polar ends of some of that thinking is, I read Rick Rubin's book, The Creative Act.
Yeah, love it. There it is.
Right behind you. Okay. Yeah. And I've also been reading Ray Dalio's Principles.
Yeah.
And so Ray Dalio comes with everything, like everything's ones and zeros. You just put your principles in place, execute against them, and everything will work out fine.
Yeah.
And Rick Rubin's like, feel the flow, engage with the universe and follow what it's doing. And, that's the goal. And so you've got these, so I've loved that because I can identify with big parts of what they both say, but I feel like those are two guys I'd love to get in a room together. Yeah. Right. Yeah. So I try to think about like, who are two people that I would love to get in a room together and see how they hash out some of those core differences, but where there's clearly a bridge in there somewhere. So that's one. I'm a pretty big like reader, listener to as many ideas as I can get my hands on. I'm also I'm a verbal processor. And so for me, a lot of times when I left the private equity firm, I sort of had two long-term professional filters. So I thought, I don't ever want to have a boss again. And I also never want to not have partners again.
Interesting.
So I never want to do something alone, but I also want to be working with people who I can spar with, who will challenge me, who I can challenge as well. And I love to sit in a room and talk something through. Part of the challenge with Monday Night now is like, as the sort of co-founder CEO, is if I start riffing on an idea or just processing something out loud, people will start taking notes and be like, okay, great, we'll get on that. I'm like, no, I'm not saying do it.
Yeah.
I'm literally just working this out.
Thinking out loud. Yeah.
So I do that with my wife, with our family. I mean, almost every day she jokes that she knows more about our business than most people that work at the company, because I just need to process it all.
Yeah.
So that's a big, those are a couple.
And where did the idea for Monday Night come from?
It was a total accident. We, I was in a small group Bible study with a group of guys from my church, and we didn't all know each other very well. So we were having Bible study at like 6 a.m. on Friday mornings in our late 20s. So we were sort of 50% humans who didn't know each other. And we thought, hey, we need to do something just to get to know each other better in a more casual environment that's not 6 a.m. And so Monday nights were free, and someone's wife had gotten them a homebrew kit. And so we brewed beer on a Monday night. And then we had a batch of beer that tasted directionally like beer. And so we started brewing every single Monday night and then I'd like to say we started making more beer than a Bible study in good conscience could consume by itself. So we started inviting friends and neighbors and coworkers over, and that's how the Monday night thing started. And we just started to just pay attention to what was happening, not just on like we're making good beer, but there's something really beautiful about the culture and the relationships that formed like over in a really casual setting with a beer in hand. And so a lot of where I feel like I have taken very unexpected turns in my life and career have started with just paying attention to what's happening right around me, and just following the thread. I feel like I have very little master plan for my life, and much more just interested in like just being curious about like what's happening, who are the people around me, what are the things that are energizing me right now, and just following those threads.
Yeah. Makes me think about Matthew McConaughey's book, Green Lights. Have you read that?
I did.
Yeah, he just like follows the thread, the green lights, you know.
Yeah.
But I mean, he's obviously got this great spirit of freedom about him.
Indeed.
Yeah.
Indeed. He clearly doesn't have 4 children. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm curious about, this is a bit of a tangent, but your relationships with Joel and Jonathan. So I did not know that you guys were not close when you started it, but you know, what did that teach you, banging up against each other? And then as you guys became great friends, was that tough running a business? I mean, I've been in some of those situations, right?
Yeah.
With like friends and business, and generally they've gone fine, but there a lot of times there's a little of a tension there, you know, and sometimes obviously it can go off the rails, but I don't know. What was your experience with that?
Yeah. I mean, my general perspective is that starting or running a business with friends and family is either like the absolute best or the worst.
Yeah.
And for exactly, I think what you're alluding to, I think the key to our partnership over time has been humility and appreciating one another.
Yep.
So we knew very early on that none of us could do this on our own. And we also developed a really strong appreciation for what each person brought to the table and focused more on that than what we ourselves were bringing to the table. And that helped tremendously. I remember we sat down, we had about a 3-year process of like putting a business plan together. And Jonathan was the organized one who was driving, like, we're going to get together every other week. We're going to work. This is your deliverable. He just stayed on us, and we really appreciate it. We didn't feel, because we knew that Joel and I were sort of a little more scatterbrained creative types.
Yeah.
And, but then there was a moment where we sat down on Joel's porch and for a meeting, and Jonathan said, okay, well, somebody's got to be the CEO. We need somebody to actually like be the shot caller day to day on things. So we should decide that. And we all kind of looked around at each other, and I'm like, oh my gosh, please say me, please say me, please say me. Like I'm wired. I love it. And Jonathan said, Joel and I think it should be you. And I was like, oh, thank God. But so I think like a high degree of like deference to one another, appreciation for what each other is doing. Jonathan, on the other hand, was a marketing background. And so I deferred almost entirely to him on marketing, not exclusively. And I'd try to press him on things, but at the end of the day, like that's not my strong suit. And I'm going to continue to lean heavily on other people for the things that I am not good at. Yeah.
And I would guess that the faith underpinnings, I mean, like I hear that in you talking about humility, not that that's exclusive to faith, but certainly a big part of
it. Helps inform it for sure.
Yeah. So, I mean, I imagine that soil helped those relationships flourish perhaps in a way where if it's like me first, money first, whatever the dynamic is, for some folks outside.
100%. Yeah. I think aligning on a vision that was bigger than just money or outcomes.
Yeah. But or even making beer. I mean, it sounds like it was actually more about relationships.
Yeah. And we settled pretty early on like a purpose statement, which is Monday Night Brewing exists to deepen relationships over some of the best beer in the world.
Yeah.
And so
great.
those three things have really helped us. Like if we make phenomenal beer, have a phenomenally successful business, but are not doing it in a relational way, then we failed. And vice versa. If we are the greatest place to work and everybody's feeling lovey-dovey and kind, but we
can't pay payroll,
make crappy beer and can't make payroll, then we failed too.
Yeah.
And so we aligned on that, I think, early on. And that requires having something that you're aligned on that's bigger than just what's right in front of you, and what I think most of like our society would tell us success looks like.
Yeah. And what were your reference points in those early days of Monday Night for inspiration, creativity? Like, because you guys were early, right? I mean, there was Sweetwater. I'm sure you know of all the players, but it felt like you guys were early in the game, and then now there's a lot of them. But, what was inspiring to you guys? What were you looking at for wisdom, what I would classify as like good thinking, and like, how do we do this? Are there things that stand out?
Yeah. We were the first brewery to open in the city of Atlanta for 17 years when we opened. So Sweetwater had been the first one before us when we opened our location in 2013. I think the first, even early days when we were brewing in the backyard, Jonathan started a blog and it got a lot of traffic. I don't know why, but we had like upwards of 10,000 visits a month.
What was it called?
It's just Monday Night Brewing.
Okay.
Yeah. I think at the time it was Monday Night Brewery that we ended up not being able to use for legal reasons. But, and then we used that platform. We ended up getting a lot of like beer enthusiasts following us. And so we used that as a platform to try to reach out to experts and people who had done it before us. So Dogfish Head was a big inspiration for us. And so we did an interview with Sam Calagione, who was the founder of Dogfish Head. We spent a lot of time, the guy that started Hop City here in Atlanta, a bottle shop, he was starting his business around the same time. So we just talked to as many people as we possibly could who had been further along. And we took it slow. We took it really slow and tried. So we brewed in the backyard for 4 years before we launched the business. And then I think also trying to stay connected with people who weren't necessarily just in the beer world, but are also in the business world. Because there are a lot of breweries that have struggled, I think, over the last, especially 5 or 6 years, because they rated their 401k to do a passion project, which is just make beer. They just want to make beer. And I don't blame them. Like, it's fun, it's great, but it's not particularly a sustainable business model. And so I think one thing that's helped us too is taking our cues both from the beer industry on the one hand, but also from just broader small business who's grown and scaled successful small businesses.
What are the principles? We
read a great book called Small Giants that was about kind of chronicling 6 or 8 businesses that had were still relatively small, but that had grown, been successful, but had done it in a way that was very much like aligned with their values and they were principled. So that was another read that was really helpful for us.
Yeah. All right, jump into music. So you talked about how it was in your home. Maybe even starting there, like, when was the first time you realized you had this creative thread, that manifested in playing music? But was there a moment or a season or a conversation where you're like, gosh, this other piece of, at that point you weren't thinking about business necessarily, but I'm just interested in where the creative juices came from.
All my siblings played instruments. I'm the oldest of 5. And so every Christmas, my dad, for Christmas, he wanted a concert with the kids playing Christmas music.
Yeah, I like that.
So it's just always been,
Trapper.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So, but really, it started for me just appreciating music. I remember getting like my first Walkman and just sitting in my room for hours just listening to music. So I think it started with just an appreciation for the beauty that and the emotion that it evoked in me before I ever got inspired to do it myself.
Yeah.
I was always, and I never really thought about myself as creative or artistic because I was terrible at drawing. I was all the things that you sort of, anything sort of spatial is really like my brain just does not work like that. And so it's taken me actually a long time to even think of myself as creative. I tend to iterate off of other people's ideas too, which is actually one of the things that Rick Rubin talked about in the Creative Act. is that really there's very little that's truly unique in art and creating. But I think too, the other thing that really, I think probably the moment that I really kind of started getting turned on was to music was when I got to do it with other people, do it in the context of like a band, and the things that could be created with a group of people working in concert together to make something that you could never do on your own. That was just beautiful to me. And so from there, when I started writing music when I was in high school, and I think part of what helped me do that was I could hear the whole band. I could hear every other part that was kind of coming together to make something. Whereas before that, I feel like I would sometimes sit to try to write something and it would just be me and a guitar or me and a piano. And so doing it with other people and getting again, a window into something that was bigger than just me.
Yeah. The relationship part. Strikes again.
Yes, that's right.
And so how is it continued to be like, what role does it play in your life? I mean, obviously you play at church, but what's the relationship with the muse now, or how's it been through the years? Like when I talk to other friends that are into music, like it's like it is a relationship, and it's like a very important part of how they maybe process or get inspired or work things out. I'm curious what role it's played, especially as you've been in pretty hardcore business, between investment funds and startups and whatever. I don't know, how is that intersected?
Yeah. Certainly from church helps a lot, or is a significant outlet for me that I really look forward to every week. And in part too, because just the relationships I've gotten to form there. But I would say when I had young kids, my kids are now between 8 and 16. When they were little, that was the part where I think if I think about music as a muse, where we sort of fell out of touch for a little while. Yeah. I was listening to a lot of music, but not nearly having the headspace or the time to really write and be creative. And actually, I'd say just in the last 4 or 5 years, as the kids have gotten older, and my primary job as a parent is not simply to keep them alive. And I feel like I've gotten the space to re-engage with even that part of me, which kind of comes out in that. So we did a 3-month sabbatical in late 2023 with our whole family in France, and really did very little work. And I wrote a lot of music there. And a big part of what helped me there was just journaling. I was just trying to journal every morning for 30 minutes or so, just kind of stream of consciousness. And the things that came out were really a lot of fodder for a lot of songs. Really? Yeah.
And have you done anything with those? Like, are you performing them at church, or is it just more for you? And
yeah, some of them, my writing style tends to go back and forth between like angsty indie rock and worship music. Yeah. So I've got some of both. So there's several of the songs that I've written in the last few years that are part of our regular repertoire at the church, and others that I've done just little demos on my computer, and I've built out a little home studio as well, which has been a really great outlet.
So that's interesting. So what would you say the ingredients were? I mean, you went on sabbatical, so you're carving out space and time, and then journaling. Were there other ingredients that then allowed it to blossom in that 3-month period? The songs and creativity?
Yeah, I think a big part was just being removed from the day-to-day mental burden, and not necessarily that I don't want, but of being a CEO and an elder, and a friend, like literally I would have, there was nothing else calling for my attention or energy. And I think that's big. I've realized how huge that is, because in the middle, even right now, I'm in a season where I've got a lot on my plate trying to transition these two things. And I'd say over the last 6 months has been more of a dry spell creatively, because I just don't have the space I need. I just need that mental, not just the time, but the mental headspace to be like, you're free. Just be yourself, as opposed to thinking about all the things that need to be solved or figured out.
Yeah, I agree. I track with that and agree. So then how do you create maybe it's not to that degree of headspace where music's bursting out of you, which I love that idea. But how do you create the space and conditions in the day in, day out where we both have, these long task lists that we enjoy, but it's a lot, but to think creatively about business or about your kids? I mean, I think of you and Hannah as like these awesome parents, and you guys are doing these adventures, and it's just always, whether it's like chickens in the backyard or going to France, or every time I hear about what y'all are doing, it's inspiring. So how are you finding the time to do your best thinking or being creative, even in a business or family or church context now that you're not in France?
Yeah. Well, some of them I'm doing, some of them are aspirational that I feel like I should be doing. So I can share a little bit of both of those things. I do feel like I'm always at my best headspace when I'm regularly like exercising and getting outside.
Yep.
I've been quite poor at that the last several months as well. And but I think that's almost always a precursor for me of healthy creativity.
Yeah.
And then I think too, another thing that I've had to just come to terms with is that there are seasons where I'm going to have different places where my creativity is going to come out more. So right now it's just frankly not a season where I'm going to be writing a lot of music.
Yeah. And
that's okay. And I know that over the course of my life, there have been seasons where it's up and down. And so I think just getting more comfortable that that's okay. And then realizing then that there are other areas in my life that do require a lot of creativity. So starting an investment company requires a tremendous amount of creativity. And I think even just naming it as that, and then that's where having a partner is really helpful to be able to. We were actually right here in this conference room, a few rooms over, 2 or 3 weeks ago, just talking about, okay, what's our 90-day plan? And we needed like 2 hours in a different space. So I think place is really important.
Yeah.
And context and environment and intentionality. I don't think we came in that morning feeling particularly like inspired, but just being in a new place, having a big whiteboard, thinking about it together out loud, was incredibly productive and creative. So I think space is important. I think intentional time is important. I think being well rested and generally healthy is important.
Yeah.
And being flexible. There are days when you're just not going to get the time.
Yeah.
And that's okay. It doesn't mean you won't get it tomorrow.
Yeah. Some days you just got to power through to what you got.
Yeah.
What about cultivating a innovative, creative mindset, or just, cultivating good problem solving or thinking? Like you mentioned something at the top of the show about seeking diverse perspectives. Are there other things that you would encourage us listeners, a new intern of like, hey, here's how you here's how you cultivate the right mindset for your best thinking or to get to those ahas or insights?
Yeah. I mean, a couple of ideas that have really jumped out to me in Ray Dalio's book that I've been reading.
Mm-hmm.
One is he talks a lot about your job is not to be right, it's to find out what's true. And so always there just is a mindset shift of I'm not trying to get to the right answer, I'm trying to find out what's true. And then usually that makes decision-making a lot easier. And it also breeds a lot more curiosity about what other people's perspectives are and what the different possibilities could be. So that's one thing I really try to practice regularly. Then the other thing that he mentions that I've really connected with, when two ideas are sitting in tension with each other, or two different desires or desired outcomes seem to be in tension with each other, instead of saying, which one do I have to pick? Mm-hmm. Starting with the question, is there a way that I can have like as much as possible of both? And so I think of something like, at the brewery, I care a tremendous amount about our culture. And so I think that, let's say that we're trying to hire somebody wants to hire a new position, but I really am not sure that we've got, that we're going to have the capacity or the budget to do that at a full-time role, that we're going to get the ROI on it. And so my options are not just fill the role or don't fill the role. It could also be, hey, could this be a part-time role? Could this be something where someone moves into that? Is there someone else who's got some capacity who this could be a growth opportunity for? Like, how do we solve the operational need that is being raised by the need or desire for a new position with the financial reality of like, I'm not sure this is necessarily the best financial investment yet.
Mm-hmm.
So that's a small example just in the day-to-day business where just thinking not just in a binary decisions, but what other options are out there?
Yeah. Yeah. Similar. I've recently, well, I was talking to another staff member about this recently, but it's just like, if I come in with the assumption of like, this has to be done versus like, can this be done? It's a different framing. And it's like, okay, if this will happen or it has to be done. And of course, it can't always, but then it's like, well, how do I just solve this problem to get there versus can this be done? I feel like I see more obstacles in the way. So, I mean, I hear a little bit of that in what you're saying of like, can I have both? How can I make this work? Even though it's seemingly maybe they're at odds.
Yeah. Yeah.
And finding that middle ground.
Yeah. And I think that plays out for us even in like our personal lives and mental, like, and spiritual lives as well. Like in all kinds of different ways. Our physical health is in tension with our desire for good food.
Yep.
And so how do we set up the right sort of structures to try to maximize the best of multiple things?
Yeah, that's great. How about Silence? I mean, obviously it's the name of the podcast. We spelled a little bit differently with an S to get that lens in there. What role does or has silence played, in your life? And, I think about the journaling, which was likely done in silence. Mm-hmm. Though I want to be careful, there's more than just audible silence, right? So there's like silence of the mind, of the heart, silence of movement, audible silence. So I think there are different forms, and we've talked about it with some other guests. Like some people actually find silence listening to music in the background, but it helps calm their mind. But I'm curious what role it's played in your life, any of those forms, and how it's helped or not helped.
Yeah. Generally, silence is a really good thing for me. And it's also, I think, if I'm honest, it's kind of a terrifying thing. It's highly unproductive in a lot of the ways that we're told that it's
well said.
And so I think in my best moments, I can really fully lean into the deeply unproductive act of silence that I think at the core of it for me, when silence is done in my own life in a healthy way, it means that I'm comfortable just being. And so that takes a lot of different forms depending on the moment or the context. But for me, I mean, a lot of it is daily just silent prayer. And I'm a fidgeter, constantly moving, constantly fidgeting, constantly chewing gum. And so something as simple as putting my feet flat on the floor and not moving them and just feeling connected to the ground in sort of a meditative kind of way is a way to just simply be. Then on the flip side, like on Saturday, I was fortunate enough to have a couple hours by myself, and I just went and hiked for 2 hours in the woods and I saw like a group of deer that didn't notice I was there and just got to sit and watch and observe them. And so sometimes I feel like for me, silence too can be something that takes me out of myself so that I am actually just being. And then other times, it is listening to music or doing some or journaling or reading. But I think the temptation in those moments is that there's some element of productivity in those that tends not to have the same replenishing attributes as it does when I'm doing something where I'm doing nothing but being.
Yeah. Yeah. And how has faith informed your silence practice or vice versa? Yeah.
I mean, I think so when I was, I've got this one tattoo on my arm, and it is finished in Aramaic, which are Jesus' last words on the cross when he was dying. And recording this during Holy Week is a good time for that. And I wanted it when I was 25, and I waited 10 years to make sure I still wanted it. And so I got it when I was 35.
So wise. Yeah, so wise. That's what we tell our kids. Just make sure, that's the college tattoo.
Yeah. But what so appealed to me about that is the reminder that what God speaks over me is that he's done, like, whatever striving that I feel like I need to do, whatever striving or performance is expected of me in my workplace. And at the time I was at an incredibly intense firm that where I was working a ton of hours and a lot of expectation and had young kids. And so I needed that and continue to need that reminder that through Jesus, God has done all of the work that is required for me just to be loved and to be accepted.
Yeah.
And so I want my work and my efforts to be coming out of a place of groundedness and peace rather than out of a desire to prove myself.
Yeah.
Which continues to be a constant struggle. But that's been, I think, by far the most informative and helpful and comforting truth that helps me to try to stay grounded.
Yeah, that's a diamond, What do you see the differences, and how do you know by perhaps output or characteristics of thought product, work product, family relationships? Like, how do you know when you're operating from the space of groundedness and I'm enough and I'm whole and I'm, don't need to do any more? And how do you know when you're not? Are there other tells?
Yeah, there are tells, I think. But I also think I've got to be honest with myself that they're both, even if I think I'm operating from a perfect place, I've always got mixed motives.
Yeah, right. Yeah,
for sure.
Yeah. It's a scale.
It's a sliding scale, to be sure. I think one is just joy. Am I, and not necessarily fun, but am I taking deep joy in what I'm doing? When I finish up a presentation or a meeting, is my first thought, okay, how was that received? In thinking about how somebody else is going to receive it, instead just being like, this is good. And so in the same way that I think after his work of creation, that God rests on the seventh day, he does it primarily for the purpose of enjoying his work, and looking at it and saying it is good. And so I think that's probably the biggest tell.
Yeah. Yeah. I love, one of my favorite parts about the creative act is just that thread throughout of do it to be authentic to you and what's inside you. Don't do it, for the audience or to get more likes, shares, listens, CDs bought, whatever. We all know the pressure of that, though I can't imagine if you're, I don't know, musician or artist and you've had a hit and now you feel this pressure to have another hit. But I deeply resonate with that of try to find out what's, I heard Robert Greene talking about this too, who's written these tomes, these books on, it's kind of like, I guess, like psychology, like laws of power and whatever, but he's this prolific author, and same thing. It's just like, we all have this unique, quirky self gift. And so give that, don't conform to what you think people want. I mean, certainly you got to operate within some boundaries. I don't know that Ruben does, it's like you look at him and his beard and all that. It's like, that's great. I love it. But
another thing that jumps out to Rob is when we do that, we bring ourselves fully to a place, it tends to bring out other people's selves. It tends to give them the freedom to more fully be themselves and be transparent and vulnerable.
Yeah, 100%.
And so that's probably another tell is my presence in my work drawing out the best in other people, or is it making them feel like they have to conform to what it is that I'm putting in front of them?
Yeah, 100%. Well, and I mean, you said this word, and I think Brene Brown talks a lot about this, though we've experienced it probably in just faith and other, but it's like, when you're vulnerable, it almost, maybe not 100% of the time, but it often leads to vulnerability from others.
Yeah.
It's like infectious.
Yes.
And creates this really generally healthy, life-giving kind of flow that, when I share something, you then feel safe to share something.
Yeah.
And that like something deep in us really needs that, whether you're a person of faith or not.
Absolutely.
Like, you need to share and kind of get things out and be vulnerable.
Yeah. And my favorite sort of reflection on vulnerabilities is Andy Crouch and his short little book called Strong and Weak. And it's got one of my favorite tools in the universe, the 2x2 matrix, with vulnerability on one axis and authority on the other. And his main point is that up and to the right is a place where people exercise a high degree of authority, meaning that they're using the gifts, resources, talents that they have in any area. That could be relational or financial or any kind of, or time, but doing it in a way that's deeply vulnerable, which actually involves the real risk of loss. And vulnerable is different than transparent. It means you actually have the chance of losing something or being hurt. But I think that's where, and he argues that like that's the place where human flourishing happens, is when we can exercise our authority in any number of ways and do it in a way where we're actually taking risk. And we can invite, and what happens as you point out is we typically are inviting other people to join us there.
Yeah, that's great. Thanks for sharing that. I need to read that. And something else comes to mind of evolution, from an evolutionary perspective. It's interesting because it seems like vulnerability would not lead to survival. I mean, kind of everything tells you, stay in the tribe or stay in the cave, or, it's like vulnerability leads to death, years ago. And yet our souls actually really need it. And so I don't know, I can't I'm not smart enough to pick all that apart, but that's interesting that it's kind of against what society, culture often, because even today, I mean, we're not living in caves and swinging clubs at lions, but
speak for yourself.
Yeah, maybe you are. But we're going out and fighting every day in the work world, and often that's not a place that's warm to vulnerability. You're still having to battle, and yet if you never create space and time and relationship to be vulnerable, something is suffering inside of you.
Yeah, something's atrophying for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Are there certain values that you're gravitating toward more now than maybe before? I mean, some could be consistent, but I'm curious, what are the ones that really stick out? Particularly, having 4 kids, being a part of a faith community, these businesses. Are there certain ones that you feel a closer resonance with?
So one that continues to just be a lifelong journey, I think, is, I used this word earlier, but is humility. And I think some of the places where that's really working itself out in my own life right now, one, on the family front, I've got 3 teenagers, and to parent teenagers well and to not feel like it's your job to control them, you have to just be humble about what you're really capable of doing.
Yeah.
And displaying that kind of, it becomes a much different from when they were little toddlers, where you're really very concretely controlling their physical environment, to a place where you're really coming alongside and helping to train, coach, and teach, and then let go in a lot of respects. With both Monday Night and with Southstone, the new investment endeavor, I think realizing that I'm with partners like Monday Night has grown to a point where I'm actually doing it a disservice by being the guy at the center of everything, and trying to sort of step back. And even in the church, when we planted the church, there was 50 people, and there were 4 of us on the first, 4 of us elders at the beginning, when we had 150 people, and now we have over 1,000 people and a 25 person session, and so I'm less important, and it's important for other people to be able to rise up, to be able to help solve problems and lead in meaningful ways, and that requires me to get out of the way.
So how did you learn that lesson? I mean, I think this is one of the keys to what I would term second half of life, that you start letting go of things. And it's so evident when people are not, you can see it in outward manifestations of cars and, whatever, but we'll get into that. But everybody knows those folks, but it's a hard lesson to learn of start putting yourself, or start stepping back, putting others first. and you're still in, I would say, prime of life. I mean, you're not, it's not like you're 75, but so perhaps you're starting this journey early, but how did you learn that hard lesson of humility and starting to let go? Especially when you're at the top of things.
Yeah.
It takes a lot to then release the grip.
It's hard. I'm still learning. I'm still very much on a journey. One real cue that has just made me more humble is when I get angry. I don't think of myself as an angry person or struggling with anger. But there have been several instances over the last 4 or 5 years where I've really disagreed with the direction that something's going, or the tone of a conversation, and I just feel in my body like anger coming up.
Yeah.
And that has typically not gone well when I've leaned into it, as you can imagine, in my marriage, in my work, in the church. And I think I've gotten a lot better at just owning and apologizing. I think of one instance where it was in a context where I kind of went off on somebody, and in a meeting with maybe 15 other people. And it wasn't crazy, but it was clearly like uncomfortable for everyone, and I myself included. And I reached out to that individual directly, like immediately. We had lunch, and then I sent an individual text to every other person that was in the meeting just to say like, hey, that was out of line, and I just want to apologize. And I want you to know I'm working to, mend things with this other individual. And that was really, really hard. It was embarrassing. I think that's a place too, is like when I'm embarrassed by something, it's a sign that I've really tried to get something in a chokehold or white knuckle something.
Yeah. Hey, that's a great word. I think anger is embarrassing, and I'm familiar with it. I mean, it's my wiring is high intensity, high passion, and the flip side of that can be high anger.
Yeah.
And like perfectionism, and so if I'm not getting it perfect, and this high control deal. And so, I'm very familiar with, losing my cool, and the emotion that comes, I'm just like, man, I'm so embarrassed. Like, it's so embarrassing. Why did I do this?
Yeah.
And in the moment you feel so justified of this righteous anger.
Yeah.
And then I'm like, oh my gosh, it's humbling.
It is very humbling.
I'm with you.
And most of the time, I like to frame it as like, this is righteous anger, righteous indignation, and I'm just defending good things.
Yeah.
90% of the time, I'm defending myself, or I'm defending my own ego, or I'm defending my own importance in an organization, or my own will. And I'd say I've gotten better in the sense that most of the time where I feel that coming on, I don't lean into it. But I've really started to try to pay attention to like, what am I really angry about?
Yep.
Because usually anger is, or in fight is you're defending something. So what am I defending internally? What is it that what feels threatened right now?
Yeah.
And usually it's not something that is worthy of it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Certainly not to like have relational damage as a part of it.
Yeah.
As an outcome.
That's good. So humility. Anything else come to mind on values?
I think we're at a phase in life where you also start to get pretty confident in your own skills, and rightly so. You've had over 20 years of professional experience in doing things, and I've learned a few things along the way, and people start to look to you more as a leader and somebody who knows what you're doing and what the right decisions to be made are. And so I think I'm really wanting over the next season of life to continue to try to aggressively cultivate curiosity. I find it easier and there's some things that are great where you're like, I know this, I've done this, like this is the answer. And that's also a real gift in this season, but I'm really wanting to continue to be curious about myself, about other people, about solutions to problems, about what could be, not just what is. I remember listening to an interview with a church planter when we were planting Westside and the church. And he said, the worst people to be on a part of, he was being a little cheeky, but the worst people to be a part of like a church planting team are like men in their 50s, because they think they know everything. Like they're not old enough yet to be at that place where you're like, I'm just glad young people like you are doing this. And they're still in the prime of their career. And so as I think about what do I want to be in my mid 50s, I just want to continue to cultivate a curiosity about the world.
Yeah. So wise. I have a friend in my life who's he's a mentor, and he's a developmental psychologist, and he talks so much about this very thing of, and he's got a great book, but these 5 stages of development through life. And so many people, like stage 4 is kind of mastery over, like you become self-authored, you know who you are, you know how to do things, often, you're running something, you're advanced in your career. And it's that kind of mindset you point to of like, I'm pretty good at this. I know how to do it. Whatever it is, family life, business life, and that it's really hard to then transcend to the final step to say, yes, I do, but I want to keep learning and growing and having this curiosity. And it's not from like needing external validation. It's more just, I'm not going to describe it perfectly because I'm not there and I don't understand all the facets, but it's like this open-handedness of, again, I know how to do a lot of things, and yet I can keep learning from others.
Yeah.
And yeah, that analogy about the church planting resonates a lot because I know people who have become, tight-fisted in their beliefs, and it's in me too. And it's like I can see where I would get there. And so I think, kudos. I think to lean into like, okay, I don't want to stay there. I want to keep growing, learning.
Yeah.
I love that word.
And I think the reason I bring all those values for me are like things that I'm fighting for, not that I'm mastering in any way.
Yeah.
And so,
those are great ones.
I think maybe the last one I would say that I'm desiring more of right now and in this next season is generosity. And I mean that really actually not primarily financially. In a lot of ways, I feel like I'm in a season where I'm like starting a new company and trying to, there's less of that than, that's not kind of the life stage I'm in necessarily, but I want to have a generous disposition towards people. And I think primarily one of the main places I see that playing out is with my kids and my family, is just being generous in my assumptions about them, being generous with my time and attention towards them, being generous with, the ways that doing the things that they want to do. I think time and attention is the big one. Is how do I be generous with my time and attention to the people that are right in front of me?
Yeah.
I hate, like, I'm really bad with like returning phone calls and the phone generally, because I get this sense when somebody is calling me, I'm like, that I'm going to have to give them my attention. There's a stinginess to it where it's hard to do anything else when you're on the phone with somebody, unless you're like in the car or whatever. But they can hijack your time.
Yeah.
And especially, we've all got those people in our lives who are like, I know if I pick up the phone, it's going to be 30 minutes. And there are times when where that's okay.
Yeah.
But I don't like what happens inside of me sometimes where I'm like, don't you take that away from me.
Yeah.
Instead of having a disposition of like, I am not the master of my own time even. And so I can afford to be generous with my time and attention.
Yeah. Yeah. A couple things there. I mean, attention, it's like the scarcest resource now, and I meant to actually ask you this earlier about how to filter out the noise, but in thinking about attention, it's like, I know that I like to think I'm thoughtful about this, and yet I still, struggle with the phone and the kids, and now my kids are old enough where they're calling me out of like, get off your phone.
Yeah.
And I've got a little bit more of an excuse to be on my phone than maybe they do. They don't really have full access to phones yet, but it's like, okay, I do have to work and do some of that. But on the other hand, work is always there. Like at some point I just have to say enough, like during dinner or when I'm reading you a book at night or whatever. It's like phones away, phones off. I'm not paying attention to this, but they totally notice attention.
Yes.
And they care about that more than anything I could buy them. You know, in this season of life, they care more about just my focus, my attention, my getting down on their level, metaphorically or you know, physically, and engaging with them. So, and you know, same with wife, same with friends.
Yeah.
It's like, it's a big gift.
It
to
is.
get people now.
And like any gift, like you bear a cost by giving it.
Yeah.
And I think that's what I'm realizing is like, it's generous with my attention. I want to be generous with my attention, but it's not just like there's a cost to it. It costs me something. It costs me doing something else or feeling in control by checking on an email or knowing what's going on in the world. But that's why it's actually valuable.
Yeah. Yeah. And there's this productive drive that we've talked about in there.
Yeah.
It was interesting. I was talking to somebody last night and they were relaying, they and their wife had gone on this kind of retreat that they do up in the mountains. It's supposed to just be their time. They ended up running into kind of an old friend who invited them over for dinner. And so there's a little bit of a tension of like, well, it's supposed to be our time. And I think they ended up saying like, we'll come over for a glass of wine, you know. But he was like, you know, we just realized that we are so scheduled and our attention is so scheduled that we can hardly ever be spontaneous. We can hardly ever say yes to those things. And we don't like that, you know? And so like, let's lean in and kind of compromise here. I mean, they wanted to spend time with them, and go see them. So what about challenge? Like what role does challenge play in your development in this season and just how you think, how you do life? You've hit on some really, I think, great nuggets in these values. But you're a go-getter. So I imagine, you know, you faced a lot of challenges in life and overcome a lot. You know, you're a successful guy. So how do you think about that?
I think if there becomes a season in life where I'm not dealing with challenges, I'm probably not living fully. And so in some ways, my temptation is to take on as many challenges as present themselves to me. So in a lot of ways, I have to decide which fights do I want to fight, which challenges do I want to take on in order to do them well, and with whom. So, I get back to the point of like wanting to always work with partners and other people. It's like I want people in my life who are going to push and challenge me. So I think it starts with really community and relationships again. One thing that struck me is that as I've spent more time in leadership at the church, I found myself a few years ago being like, I realized like I haven't been like a part of a small group or a class or anything where I've just been a participant in years. And so I default into like leading. And what happens is like, I'm in control. Everybody's looking to me for the answer. I'm the one who's supposed to be challenging them, not the other way around. And so even something as simple as a group of neighbors that have been getting together on Thursday mornings once a week, who none of them, I don't work with any of them. I don't go to church with most of them, but they share a lot of the same values and beliefs. And we live in proximity to each other. Like they don't need anything from me. Yeah. And so they're in a better position to be able to actually press in. So I'm realizing I need to put myself in more situations where people have the relational dynamic where they can really push and engage and challenge me.
Yeah. Yeah. Because, you know, leaders often get isolated and then there's no one holding a mirror up. And just like you said, like everybody's looking to you. I mean, I know pastors wrestle with this of it's hard for them to find folks that can be vulnerable and transparent with. And so therefore they can get, and I think, you know, politicians and celebrities and other people in power, you know, they get alone, which is never good for any of us.
Yeah.
Because there's all these power dynamics and nobody can challenge you without a consequence.
Yeah.
So that's,
I think loneliness generally is one of the biggest threats to like growth and creativity in a lot of ways. And I think one of the things I'm realizing is like loneliness can hit when you're surrounded by people and actually doing really great stuff and working really hard together and spending a lot of time together and people you really like. But it doesn't mean that like loneliness can't set in. And so I think about too, like the next, you know, there's all these stats about like, you know, when men hit 60, you ask their wives, like, how many friends do you have? And she'll be like, 8.
Yeah.
And you ask the husband, he'll be like, I have one friend and it's my wife.
Yeah.
And,
and
so I have so many rich relationships in my life, that I have no excuse to be that guy at 60. My wife will be on the list, by the way. But I want to be more intentional about cultivating those relationships where people getting back to vulnerability, where people actually know me enough to be able to push and challenge me.
Yeah, that's good. Well, what are your hopes ahead the next 5-10 years? I mean, we've hit on a lot of themes, but anything else come to mind of something you're working toward, aspiring? I mean, I think about it too in terms of like life's work. I mean, you've had a lot of seasons. I'd be interested in how you characterize what your life's work will be. But
yeah,
I think, real quick to interject, I've found, particularly in this kind of midlife, cresting the hill, to the second part, I think more about these things of what have I accomplished, and doesn't necessarily just mean career-wise. And, it's like, I'm still mid-late 40s, so hopefully I've got a lot of years left. But I think more about it of like, what's my life's work? What do I want it to be? What do I want ahead? Like I've only got a few more probably seasons, at least professionally. So where do I want to be spending my time? And then of course with kids, it's like, oh my goodness, they're, 16, 18 before you know it. And so how do I seize the day? But anyway.
Maybe there's all kinds of practical goals and hopes that I have.
Right.
So I'll sort of take those for granted. So I think two things, starting with like, what kind of, who do I want to be? What kind of person do I want to be?
Yeah.
I think I really want, and I think we've talked a lot about that, of those things of curious and humble and staying sharp. And so that's, I think, a big part of what my hope is. It's just, I want to be that kind of person.
Yeah.
And then the second question was like, what does the life's work look like? I think like we were talking about as well, I love sitting in the middle of different kinds of worlds and being sort of a mediator, connector, bridge, beneficiary of those places. It's one of the reasons I love Atlanta. Atlanta is just a beautiful mess of a place. It's a beautiful, diverse mess with so much, and there's so much amazing difference that exists in Atlanta. Mm-hmm. And that's one of the reasons I've stayed here for so long and have fallen in love with it. And so whether it's in the church or whether it's in the bridge between like the small business guy who built a fence company for 40 years with a 10th grade education and the rich family office in Dallas, like those are the kinds of bridges I love building. The place I just love sitting in the middle of those tensions.
Yeah. I agree. Rachel and I feel the same way. And I've said this, but on the podcast, but one of the reasons we're in Atlanta, which has a lot of great things, but it also has a lot of pains, just whether it's traffic or, whatever, but cost of living. But we stay here for just that mess that you talk about. But it's like a beautiful mess, and the diversity of thought and people and all these things coming together, hopefully sharpening each other, but banging up against each other. And there's life found in that. And we want our kids to grow up in that, at least until we can move to a remote island or, at the top of a mountain, or, we love nature spaces. But I think for this season and raising a family, and there's all these rich relationships. Yeah. And so the city provides a lot. Yeah.
And I think Southstone, my hope is that I've had, a decade in sort of the corporate M&A world, a decade in like as an operator. And as I think about vocationally, my hope is that for the next, 20 plus years, I have the privilege of being able to help bring visibility, appreciation, recognition, wealth, and to like people who have built those really hard, blue collar, boring businesses that are crucial to our economy, crucial to our society, but that have really fallen out of the visibility and line of sight of so much of our of our cultural leaders.
Yep.
And so that motivates me tremendously.
Yeah. I think they're going to have their day. I think AI is going to is going to cause a disruption where there's going to be a lot of folks saying, man, I wish I had that fence company.
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
All right. Well, as we wrap, what would you leave everybody with? Thought, question, challenge, anything come to mind? Your charge to them as they go out on their day?
Find a way to ask a question about everything, every situation you're in, to learn something.
Yeah.
I think asking questions out of genuine curiosity. I think those are the days when I have my best days. When I'm not trying to get a quick answer, so I can make a decision or move on or get a piece of information to look good, but to truly know more of what's true and know more about what's good.